Thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. This is Terry Dobbs from ERP-One. We appreciate everyone joining us today to dig a little deeper into JD Edwards mobility. So our agenda today is as follows. We'll have a brief introduction of who we are here at ERP-One. We will go over AIS and its various endpoints, where I will show you where you can find all the information you need to get started using AIS and the endpoints. We'll also touch upon some of the more commonly used AIS endpoints. We'll also do a quick demo of our CNC dashboard application that we created using Oracle's mobile application framework, and we'll touch upon which AIS endpoints we used to create that application. And then I'll hand the presentation over to Daryl, where he'll continue to show some other areas where we can utilize AIS with JD Edwards. So we'll start off with the classic and search pages, and then Daryl will show a quick demo of an app that we created using Oracle Jet, Oracle Jet Sales Quoting app. We'll then take time to answer any questions. So if anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to just type them in the question dialog below, and we'll make sure that we get to them. Okay, let's get started. So who we are here at ERP-One, some of you on the call might be familiar with us, but if you're not, we pride ourselves on being one company that can help you with all different types of solutions that you need. So we offer expertise in E1 technical consultant, security, and compliance, as well as database services. We also have a fantastic managed services team that support many of our clients today. Another area that we work in is application development and consulting. We've been lucky enough to work with clients to meet their various applications, mobile application needs. This is the main area we will be focusing on today in this particular webinar, but look out in the future for other webinars in the different areas. So enough about us, let's get into the AIS server. So the AIS server, if you've attended any of the last couple of webinars, we've touched on it. It's the application interface services server. The AIS server exposes endpoints and enables access to enterprise-one data and applications, and it also produces JSON over REST responses. So basically, each endpoint provides a particular service from the AIS server, and these are commonly referred to in the documents as AIS services. So the AIS clients use these services to interact with enterprise-one forms and data. The AIS server is still fairly new in that it was only a couple of years ago with the advent of tools release 9144, I believe, where it was first introduced. But every tools release since then, they've added a lot more features to the AIS server. With tools release 9212, they've introduced what they call version 2 of the AIS services, where some more enhanced functionality is provided. Some of the main ones are speed increases. It limits the response time so you can just get the data you need, as well as they have a fetch next service where you can fetch groups of records at a time, kind of like the next functionality in an E1 application. As mentioned here, the AIS server, it's very easy to install. It's installed much like an existing E1 Jazz HTML server. It's deployed through Server Manager, and it can be used on Oracle WebLogic or on IBM WebSphere. As always, just make sure through certifications that your version of WebLogic, WebSphere supports the version of AIS server that you're trying to run. one thing to remember before we get into these REST APIs is that AAS is development platform agnostic. So a question we get asked a lot is people sometimes assume that to use AAS server, you have to use one specific development language. But that's not true. It's entirely up to the developer to use whatever development platform you wish to use to call these AAS endpoints. So whether it's JavaScript, Java, C Sharp, whatever it is you're using, as long as you can call a REST service or REST API, you can utilize these endpoints in your applications. We've been able to create things like JDE offline mobile apps just by utilizing these existing endpoints, but combining it with open source, freely available Cordova plugins that utilize things like MySQLite databases, things like that. So as mentioned, just one thing to keep in mind, again, it's all up to the developer to use these wherever they see fit. So for a developer getting started, the E1 REST APIs are documented very well on Oracle's website. I'm going to just open up the website here quickly to show you some of the REST APIs, some of the more common ones that we use, some of the ones that we're using in the applications that we're going to demo to you today. The link is provided in that spreadsheet, but the link that's there will open up this page as you see right here. So these are all of the REST APIs that the AAS server exposes. So these are all the ways you can interact with JD Edwards data and forms. As you can see, there are quite a lot here. If you're on the latest tools release today, 9.2.1.4, you'd be able to utilize all of these. But depending on what tools release you're on, some of these might not be available to you yet. One of the most common API endpoints that we use, and one of the best ones that I find to implement any kind of process in a mobile app is called the application stack service. So as you see in the description, the application stack service allows you to execute stateful calls to applications, including flows from one form to another. This is the most useful API for process-oriented apps, as it allows you to directly mirror a user's actions if they were to use an E1 web client. So for example, if you imagine a user is on the address book application and they click into the QBE field and they want to see just address book records greater than address number 6000, they would just type that in, click find, and then you would get presented with a grid of the records with the address book number greater than 6000. Pretty simple, but what the application stack allows us to do is perform those exact same actions in the background and allows us to retrieve the exact same data back. So if I just dig a little deeper into the web page here for the API endpoints, so for the application stack, it tells you the different services that are available. As I mentioned, there's the version 1 and version 2 services. I'm just going to focus on the version 1 services for now because version 2 is fairly new, so not everyone's on that tools release. So as you see on this web page, all the different request types are outlined. There's many different request types. We definitely won't have time to go through all of these or even touch upon many of them. But the main point is that the page really does give you all of the information you need to get up and running. There's also the sample responses back, so you can use this to program error codes, things like that. And then they also give you full-blown examples using the calls that you would need to use to the AAS server to get the data you want back. So in this example, it's kind of like the one I mentioned. This is an example request to the AAS server where they're requesting from the address book form. They're requesting address book number 6001. So just quickly, you'll see form name P01012, application name, sorry, then form W0102B, And you also see just quickly the actions they're doing. So they're setting the QBE value. This one would refer to the address book number. They're setting it to 6001, and then they're doing a do action at 15. So what this is mimicking, it doesn't look obvious here, but if you go through some of the documentation, you can find what these values represent. But this is just mimicking a user going to the QBE line, type in 6001 and press and find. So this call here through AAS is able to let you do that. So once you do that, the response you get back would be the grid with the record for address book number 6001. So again, we're not going to go too detailed into this, but you'll see the response here with the row set and the address book 6001. The alpha name is just called original name. So that's what you get back when you open up the application stack. So then what you're able to do with the application stack is once it's open and you're on this form, you can then choose to select that record and go to the address book revisions form all in the same session. So why that's useful is it triggers all of the same event rules as it would if you were on the web client. So if there's event rules for the form interconnect, web rules, event rules for pressing the button, all those things get triggered the exact same way that they would on the web client through these AAS calls. So just quickly, the next call in this app stack is they're selecting the grid record and then they're pressing the select button. So here they're selecting the first grid row record and they're doing do action 14. So they're actually going into the address book revisions form for that address book grid record. So as you see the response back from the AAS server tells you that you're on the address book revisions form. Then it goes on where you can actually change the name, save it. But again, it's very detailed and we don't have that kind of time. But the app stack is definitely one of the more useful API endpoints if you want to mimic a whole process flow in a mobile application. Related to the app stack is the form service. This was the original sort of API that was released with tools release 9144. It's similar to AppStack. The main difference with the form service is you're really only executing one form at a time. You can't really flow between forms. You can, but you have to sort of do those interconnects manually. So in that respect, all of the event rules don't always get triggered the same way. It's most useful if you just need to hit one form, get the data, and then that's it. You don't need to interact with that form and then go on to subsequent forms. One of the other things I always wanted to show quickly is called the data service. So the data service is pretty cool in that it mimics data browser activity. So with the data service, we can actually access data without accessing data through an even application. We can access data through a table or a business view directly. The data service also allows you to do things like queries and aggregation. So we can actually query a specific table, and then we can perform functionalities such as grouping by a subset of records. We can perform aggregation such as like sums, min, max, averages, counts, kind of like your basic Excel functionality. But the cool thing with the data service is all of that processing takes place on the AAS side. So you don't have to return the data set to your program and then write logic to do all of that processing. It can kind of give you the data you need it right away so you can display it. So I'm just going to quickly show you one of the data services here. So I'm just going to do a simple query. So for this data service example on the Oracle documentation here, they're just opening up F0101, which is the address book table, and they're asking back for 3 different columns. So they're asking for the address book number, alpha name, and search type. And they're also adding a query, so they're saying that they only want address book numbers that are greater than 7,000. So you can see here through the data service, they're basically querying a table directly, so you don't have to go through an E1 form to actually get this table. You don't have to go to the address book form. You can just access that table directly through AAS. So that's the simple request, and then the response here you get back the column names, and then you get back the grid records that all that match that query. So again, it's really handy, and you'll see where we've used it in our app and in some of our apps that we're going to show you. And the last one is the batch form service. Again, just a quick overview of the batch form service. It allows you to basically submit multiple requests to the AAS server at once, and then it returns you the results for those requests all at once, so you don't have to do them one after another. So for example, if your data isn't really related and you just need to get data from 3 forms at once because you're going to display it all on your screen, you can use the batch form service and sort of just create a batch request to get the data that you need. And I'll show you in our app where we've used that. Okay, so back to the presentation here. So as I mentioned, the app we're going to show first is called the CNC dashboard. It's one that, again, we started creating it when AAS server sort of first started out in the 9.147, 9.1.5 tools release era, and we created it using Oracle's mobile application framework. So primarily this application is coded all using Java, and the main intention for this dashboard app was something to give our CNCs here at ERP-One that they can kind of use as a starting point for a lot of the CNC tasks that they do. So one of the most common ones is account management. So we gave them the ability to reset passwords or to enable or disable user accounts. And we're also providing an overview of pertinent data that many CNCs or people who manage JD Edwards systems kind of look for on a daily basis. So in this application, we're using the app stack the application stack API endpoint that I touched on earlier. We're using data service, so we're doing queries over tables and views directly. And we're also using the batch form service. So we're queuing up a lot of our calls at once to get some of the data that we need. So I'm just going to switch over to our app here. So this is the CNC dashboard. This is sort of the main page you see after you log in. If you've seen any of the sort of out-of-the-box Oracle math applications, you'll notice it looks a lot different. It's all sort of just custom CSS and custom styling that we played around with for purposes of using all of the different functionality available to us. So as I mentioned, the dashboard was created in Oracle's mobile application framework, and it's currently running right now on an iOS simulator on an iPad Retina device. So the main screen you see here is just an overview of all the different sections. So we have the user management section here where we're able to see at a glance all of the users that are disabled, or at least account for the users that are disabled. We're able to see users that have the sysadmin role and users whose password is older than 30 days. So in this scenario, we're assuming that this company their policy states such that they can't have users with passwords older than 30 days. So that's one of the sort of metrics that we wanted to display on the dashboard. Same with sysadmin. Anyone who's been through an audit or any kind of process like that knows that auditors don't like having users with the sysadmin role. So it kind of looks like our lab might not pass an audit here. And again, disabled users, and then users with no roles, and then roles with no users. So all of this data is basically obtained through the data service right now. So we're querying some of these tables directly. So we're querying, just not to get too technical, but we're querying the password table and we're querying the role table. So I can actually dig a little deeper into this and click on the disabled users, and I'll see a list of all the users here that are disabled. So again, this is, once I click on that, I'm using the application stack to go to the sort of user security form within E1. So here I'm able to actually enable a user. I can actually also reset the password if I wish. So I can sort of just hold and press on a record, and then I can enable a user. And then it disappears from the list and they're enabled. Alternatively, I can also reset passwords here. So again, this is just to kind of show you the different things you can do. So we chose to allow our admins to reset passwords and to enable or disable users. And it's a good way to test some of the different functionality. So we're using data service and app stack for that particular process. And we're also only showing users that are disabled that they're allowed to actually manage. So there are some system users that show up as disabled, but we're not actually allowing them to manage. So you can kind of control all that in the code in the background. The submitted job section is pretty self-explanatory. But again, here you can see jobs processing, jobs in error, jobs awaiting, jobs completed. So again, sometimes this is information that's useful if the first thing you want to do in the morning is just check if any jobs were in error, or if you have a problem because some long job is running and all of your jobs are now queued up. You can kind of easily see this here. So I can actually drill down into the jobs completed here. And I'll see all of the submitted jobs that have completed for the last month. So again, this is our lab environment, so it's not too busy, but you can actually, this is actually using the app stack again, and we're on the view submitted jobs form, and we're able to sort of display all the information that we need. You can also do things with Mobile Application Framework and Oracle Jet. You can do like advanced graphing, things like that. You can really add a lot of visualizations to your apps. We didn't go that crazy, but we do have sort of a basic pie chart with the different job queues. It doesn't show up great in the simulator, but there are lots of things, visualizations that you can really add to your apps to make them pop. So another area we have here is sort of object management workbench. So often here we have certain OMW statuses when a project reaches a certain OMW status, we know that there's a package build that's needed. So we're just displaying the actual OMW projects that are at a certain status. So again, this is using data service. So we're using the data service over the OMW table, and we're pulling all the subsequent project statuses. So we see here there's 2 PY build requests, so I can actually drill into that, and it'll show me the OMW projects and the actual objects that are in those projects. So again, this is just demonstrating the ability to sort of pull the initial data in the front screen, and then when I dig deeper into it, I can actually get additional data from the tables. So this is all using data service. I'm pulling all of this from tables directly. I'm not actually using any E1 forms for this. And another common thing that we generally always have to do is CNCs or app managers for JD Edwards is business object reservations. So we have a screen where we can see the business object reservation, so the P00095 in JD Edwards. So you can see here that we have 3 currently present. So perhaps users got stuck in an order, or perhaps JD Edwards disconnected. Something happened, but now the users are complaining that they can't get back into the order. So we have the ability here to delete the object reservation. So even though it doesn't look like a JD Edwards application, this is using the application stack process. So I'm actually opening the P00095 form, mimicking sort of click and find, all in the background in the code. Then I'm displaying out the actual data that's returned into the grid. So I give the user the option to delete a record by swiping to the right. So once they swipe to the right, I'm basically mimicking from an E1 web client, you selected a grid record and pressing the delete button. So I should be able to swipe right here. Sometimes a little tricky in the simulator with the mouse, but there we go. And you can see that reservation is now gone, and now I'm down to 2 object reservations. And we're also displaying, again, the scheduler status. So again, that's just the data service. We're pulling the status from the scheduler, from the job scheduler table. We're just pulling the record that determines if the scheduler is up or not. So the people in the webinar, all of this might not be useful to your company, but it's just a good demonstration of what the different API endpoints, what you can accomplish with them. So you can hit forms directly, tables, views directly. You can really use it to leverage different job functionality at your company to make some things, some common processes easier for your users or for yourself even. So that kind of sums up what we've used all the AAS endpoints for in this mobile application. I'm going to pass it over to Daryl, and he's going to show us where else we can utilize AAS in JD Edwards. So over to you, Daryl.
All right, thank you. Let me take over the screen. So make presenter. And see here, can you see my screen there? All right. So one another area that you can use AIS for is it's actually used on the classic pages, and Oracle has created several samples of this, and so I'd like to take a moment to describe them and show them a little bit so we can see where it's used. They're actually utilizing Oracle Jet, if you were at last week's presentation. So Jet is Oracle's Java extension toolkit. It's an open source way of doing development. So the classic pages are another way to display key KPIs or key performance indicators in a new visual way, and we're using the Oracle Jet charting object. It uses AIS's data services, so we're just retrieving data, what Terry showed us a few minutes ago, to retrieve it and then throwing it into the charting object to see it. Utilizes UX1 design, so you can use all the object management around UX1 and the new object management tools and security around that. And because this is embedded in JD Edwards, although it is a Jet open source application, there are the authentication models exposed, and therefore you don't have to re-authenticate. So although we are in a separate piece of code that's outside of JD Edwards, because it's embedded, it's shared the authentication with the current session. And then you can create your own one of these if you want to, and I'll get into that in a second. So if I bring up our lab, give it a second to sign in. We've all seen E1 pages before, and so I'm going to show you a couple of them. The first one is a product code usage. This comes from the new object tracker. and the latest tool sets that track the activity around what objects are being used. So in this particular case, it's a line chart, um, or bar graph, I should say, where it's showing the different uh, system codes or product codes that are being used by day. And it's our lab, so there isn't as much variety that you might see in your own environment. But the data service is being called and bringing that back in. A much better example is the object usage tracker. This is showing, how often a particular objects are used. These are the common or the most commonly used objects. Again, this makes a data service call out, retrieving the data and then using the charting object to show it. This has some extra features in which that you can either change how you aggregate the data, so you could go by object, which is what's there, or you can actually go by form and version. When you change it, you have to hit the refresh button, and we go, and now we see that we can actually get into specific versions or forms that are being showed here. We can also filter it by path code. I hit refresh. So this is real time retrieving data in, and then it's displaying it in the Oracle Jet object and chart. Another example, so if we take that out, refresh, we can see the data goes back. Another great example is the case distribution. So case distribution is using call management or issue management within JD Edwards, and we can see simply that the cases are distributed by these 4 users in the system. Or again, filtering or changing how we aggregate the data. In this case, we're going to aggregate by status instead of the owner of the ticket, and we see which statuses are currently open, which ones are closed in the breakdown. This is demo data, so the data is probably not looking as interesting that you might see in your own environment. So you can create your own one of these by copying the template. And to do that, basically you find the one that you're interested in. So say you like that case distribution one. So you can find one that has the pie chart or the chart that you like, say in that case is a pie chart. All you need to do is modify the one JavaScript that comes with it. So when you download these from Change Assistant, it comes with 3 files, and here are the 3 files that it comes with. This gets bundled up into a zip file that you can then upload in as a classic page and distribute. That's how you do it, and you only need to modify this one file called the E1 AIS calls.js. I'm not going to get into it. It's a little bit more involved than a short, quick presentation, but it is described well in the UX1 deployment and development guide. So you can just go and grab that, grab your own, modify it. Shouldn't take too long to modify. Of course, it depends on your knowledge on Jet and JavaScripting and the environment that you have set up. Another great use for AIS, and in this case again is Jet, that Oracle has put together for us is called the E1 search page. So they've now created this new search page that is keyword driven, that lets you search multiple areas of E1. It's a customizable search categories, so there's actually a screen out there that you can add in search categories. Ultimately, behind the scenes, it uses the AIS server again, using the data services. It's a UX1 design, and because again it's embedded in JD Edwards, you don't have to do a separate authentication. The token is available for you. So let me bring my browser back over here and show you the search page. This is also the same one that's up here. And as I type in, we'll see that it's starting to return results. So I'm going to type in the word bike. This is the bicycle database. And we can see that it got rid of the 3rd search criteria because there's no tasks with the word bike on it. So we came back to just showing some address book entries that have bike in it, and we have some items that have the word bike in it. This is all done through Oracle Jet and standard HTML. We can see that we've got some additional information. If we click on that, these are their own custom hover dialogues. So these are not the standard hover dialogues, but stuff that they've built in there that make calls back into JD Edwards. So in this case, it's showing all the sales order information for a particular address book. Or if we look at a item on hand, we'll get on hand, bills of materials, parts list as well. So some very interesting information that you can get, and you can customize the search criteria that you want. As you can see out of the box, they come with 3 different ones. So I'm going to take a second to just go through and explore a little bit on how that actually works, because I think it's really key to understand that although it looks like you're embedded into JD Edwards, you're kind of not. You're actually separated out. So let's walk through the process. We saw the little search dialog box, and we typed in the word bike. What happens there is that upon change of the box, some JavaScript, this is custom JavaScript that in this case Oracle's created for us, but it's custom JavaScript that has been created, is executed. That in turn creates what's called a JSON object, which is basically a string that we've seen in all the examples before, and calls the AIS server. Just as a side note, the token is included in that, which we've already gotten because we're logged into JD Edwards. The AIS server in turn makes a call to the HTML server to do the data services, to return its data, which then is returned back to the AIS server, and then returned back to your JavaScript. From there, the JavaScript in turn displays your data on the screen. So it's important to remember, although it looks like we're embedded in JD Edwards and that we are within the same browser window, we're actually exiting out or making a call out of JD Edwards to ultimately make a call back in. And so therefore, you could make a call out to anything that you want. Anything that you can do in JavaScript, you can now execute in there. So if you had another system that held some of your inventory information, you could make the calls out to those other systems instead of JD Edwards, or simply just call into JD Edwards and get the benefit from that as well. Okay. Next thing I want to demonstrate is a little application that we've created, and this is a demo application, so it is still needs a little bit more refinement before it become a finished product. But it demonstrates how to create a JD Edwards application using Oracle Jet. This is full mobile. In our case, I'm going to bring it over in a Android emulator. And what we're showing is sales quotes. So sales quotes are basically just sales orders in JD Edwards with an order type of SQ. Again, so we're just seeing that in the demo data. Some of the AIS calls that we're making is the get token and log out. We're using the app stack to keep within the application and use the exits. Using data services for a few things, and I'll describe a little bit about that. And we're actually seeing some file attachments along that. So let me drag over my emulator. So this is an Android emulator, in this case a Nexus 5 is what I picked. We see we have the sales quote icon. This icon is the standard Oracle Jet icon. You can change that if you want to. So upon launching the application, we come up with a login screen. This is our JD Edwards login, and I'm going to type in the proper username and password and hit login. And at this point, what's happened is we've actually logged into JD Edwards and executed the first form in the app stack to retrieve the sales quotes. So we're seeing 4 sales quotes out there. We got the document number. In this case, we've chosen just to show the customer PO and the order date. I'm going to take a second here and bring up my server manager. So here's server manager. We can go to my AIS server, and we can now see that there's one online user. And if I go to the login metrics, we can see that user JDE has logged in. into our DV environment. Some interesting information here is that it's using this particular Jazz server, so you can see that it is using the web server, and the device name is JDE test. We'd probably actually query the device itself and get a name, but in this case we just got it called JDE test. One other interesting piece of information is that you can get the form metrics, so we can see that we've actually opened up P4210 and this particular form, which is the header, and this particular version. If I go to my web server, we saw that it was port 91, so I'll go to that one. Go to the user sessions. We can see one active user. And we see that approximately a minute ago, a user has logged in, and it does indicate that it came from the AIS server. Okay. I'm going to throw that over here. So from here, going back to the application, I'm going to pick an order. Let's pick order 150. And we can go into the details. What we see here is some header information at the top. Again, we didn't put a lot of details into it. This is part of what would have to be defined if it was a finished application. But we see who it's for, the sales quote is for, and the order number, and the date. Again, this is demo data, so it's got future dates in it. For each detail line, we see a couple of key pieces of information. So we're seeing an item number, description, and a quantity. We're also seeing the product image. That product image is actually coming from JD Edwards as well. I want to take a second here and show you where that comes from. So I'm going to log into JD Edwards again. Oops. And I'm going to launch the address book, or not the address book, sorry, the item master. So P4101. If I scroll this over so we can kind of see both, we'll see that the first item was item number 210. So I'm going to put that in there just so that I can find it. And we see that there's an attachment. And when I click on the attachment, we will see the same bicycle coming up. So that we're pulling that right from the media object out of JD Edwards. Now to do that, we had to make a few different calls into JD Edwards using AIS. The first one is that media objects actually are attached using short item numbers. So the first call, although we only have the long item number, was to make a data service call back into JD Edwards to get the corresponding short item number. Once we have that, then we use the media object call to give us a listing of all available media objects. So this particular item only had one media object. Had it more media objects, we would have to pick one of them. And we're using this set as default image selector to pick which one is the default image to pick. Once we decide which one is the default or which one we want to view, we make a third call to actually request the binary information. So this is all done through JSON requests through the AIS server. So we're not accessing database directly or the file attachments folders directly. It's all going through JD Edwards through the AIS server. I'm going to scroll that over here. A few other pieces of information to just demonstrating this application. We have put, because this is mobile, we've put swipe left to put extended menu information on capabilities. So we could display more details, we could edit the line, or we could cancel the line. We could do the same thing for the next order. And if we wanted to cancel a line, we just simply hit cancel. And what we're seeing here is now we have a canceled stamp. And the reasoning for that is we're following suit with the way the JD Edwards application works. The line is not canceled or not deleted, but instead set to a status. Now, at this point, at the top left, there was a back arrow. Now it is a save button, because the way the JD Edwards application works is that it is not saved until you click the save button. So if I wanted to save this, I'd click save. In my case, I'd probably just cancel out of this. I can also hit the little dial, the little plus button, and I can add in an order or line in as well. So let's pick another item number, and now we can see that another line's been added. I did the same part number. Should have picked a different part number, but I'm not going to save my order. I'm just playing around. Cancel back out. If I go back in, we can see that my changes have not been saved. If I go back, I could have done that and saved it. But another thing to demonstrate, just wanted to show that it was capable. At any time, you can use the data service and other options. So we've got navigation throughout here. If I pick here, I got the slide out, and we've created a little dashboard right within our application. If I pick on the dashboard, we see that we did a quick query to find the top 10 customers, and that's using data services, doing an aggregate, and just then using the Oracle charting tool, the Oracle Jet charting tool. This is all built in standard. You just supply it the data and it builds it the way it displays it. And to do a 2D or 3D, it's as simple as just clicking the button to show. Okay, done. We can go back to the home and we can see back to our application again. So I think we see here how you can use Oracle Jet to fairly easily create an application that can now interact with JD Edwards and stuff. All right. At this point, that is the last thing that we were going to demo. And if there's any questions, please feel free to enter them into the question box in the WebEx. If not, you can also send us the questions later. We're glad to talk to you about them if you have anything or you want to see things in more detail. Appreciate everybody calling in. And thank you very much.